And welcome to our user group, December 2020. We're almost to the end here. Hopefully everyone is staying safe and doing well these days. I will be covering Smartlist Designer today in our session, as if you are unaware of the functionality that's out there in this, then this is for you. It is the solution to allow you to get in and create new smart lists above and beyond your normal run-of-the-mill favorites and so on that are available out there. So I turned on my webcam for a moment to say hi to everyone. I'm going to drop it off so we don't lose any of the quality of the presentation here, and we'll keep going here. All right, so everyone should be seeing my screen up here. So Smartlist Designer how-to. So what is Smartlist Designer? Where can you find it? Why would you use it? How does it work? What's new? And any additional questions. So I've done presentations like this in the past. Hopefully I've added a few different new things into this one versus what we've covered in the past. So updated the screenshots and all that fun stuff. So Smartlist Designer is an out-of-the-box alternative to Smartlist Builder. In fact, it's the free version of Smartlist Builder as you would see it. Before Smartlist Designer was present, Smartlist Builder, the add-on from E1 Solutions, was the only option to be able to create new smart lists from the beginning of time for the smart lists in the system. So E1 jumped on that bandwagon, created a solution that allowed you to create new smart lists and so on, and you would have to buy into their product to use it. While starting with GP 2013 and newer, Microsoft introduced Smartlist Designer. A little more rudimentary method of being able to do it, but it is your option as a user to be able to create and start making your own smart list without having to buy into a solution. Now, I will say that, honestly, if you've started with GP and you've used smart lists just a little bit, or let's say in the first 3 months you created 20 favorites in smart list, that's probably a sure indicator that you're going to be using smart lists pretty heavily, and adding some type of solution to create more is going to be beneficial to you. So Smartlist Designer could be your first dive to get your feet wet. It's real easy to find. If you don't have Smartlist Builder installed, it resides in the exact same place. So my presentation today, anybody who's on the session who has Smartlist Builder, this really isn't necessarily something you need to hang around for unless you want to see what this has to offer if you find yourself that you're not actually using Smartlist Builder to date. Maybe it was something added in by a previous solution architect or something in the company, and it's just something that's not utilized, and you're looking to find a different solution that you don't have to renew yearly. So feel free to stick around, take a look, and we'll go from there. So just real quick, I add these into the slides just so you know how to find it and go through each one of the pictures. So you would find it under the new button in the upper left if your security allows it. So this is still security driven, whether or not a user could go in and click on the new button. Shows up there in the upper left-hand corner. So why would you use it? Again, it's free. They normally update this, at least 1 or 2 features every update. I haven't seen anything that I can think of notably in 2018 just yet. Hopefully they'll add something fancy or maybe change the interface a little bit, make something a little bit better as they go forward. They've added some nicer things to smart lists, such as some of the date functions and, as Mike alluded to, the bulk select and things of that sort. So they're improving the smart list side and not necessarily the designer side. So again, simple to get started. Click on the new icon in the upper left-hand side. That'll get you in and get you started and working through. At that point, you'll choose and you'll name your smart list. So I'm going to leave all of these slides in here. We'll come back and we'll revisit some of the ones towards the end. But I know pictures work nicely. You'll have the presentation. You'll also have the PowerPoint that you can take with it. But I find that these types of presentations and everything do a lot better with the live demo. So what I did is I have a new instance of my GP 2018 running at the moment. And I'm going to pull that open so we can just see how this looks and feels in the latest and greatest version of the system. I think in previous presentations I was held into GP 2016 specifically for these types of things. So let's just go in. So to get into a new Smartlist Designer, I would click on New in the upper left-hand corner. So you can see here I have a few showing up that maybe you don't recognize that are outside of the norm. So stock count history lines is one that I've created through here. Item sales period history is another one that I was working on. So to get in and start with the new one, you would simply open up Smartlist to begin with. Now, one thing that I want to show you is that as I'm creating these, if I know kind of what I want it to originate from, then I can select on that. And all that's going to do is help build some of the foundation for me to get in with from a go-to standpoint. Most time people will get in and they will just immediately select new to get started. The downside of having one of these selected before hitting new is that when I hit new at the upper left-hand corner, it just immediately assumes that I want to work with a pre-existing smart list that was out here. So depending on where I was selected and started with, if I'm on one of the options that I have in here, let's say I'm on back-ordered items or something along those lines, and I hit new in the upper left-hand corner, it assumes that I want to go in and start adding new things to that pre-existing favorite smart list that's sitting out there. So just be aware, if you want to avoid that type of nuance as it comes in, you can do one of two things. You can click on the top one, click on the bottom one holding the shift key, select all of those, and just remove them. And you're back to the beginning where you don't have to worry about it. Or if it was something that you wanted to add on to, obviously you could from that point with those selected. So the other alternative to get in there and have a clean slate to begin with and not have anything selected is to just start from scratch. So open up Smartlist and then click New at the top. And the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to select the module at the top of the Smartlist Designer, but it's not going to do anything else. So you could do the same thing if you were selected on one of those at that point to have the same effect. So I know I want to create something for inventory, but I'm not going to narrow it down to one of the selections below. I'm going to hit New. Paves the road a little bit for me up here at the top. Product GP, series inventory, since I was selected on there, and then I need to give this a name. So one of the big enhancements to the most recent version of GP is the ability to import, export stock counts. So if you're a heavy warehousing environment and you're having to struggle with the GP stock counting, you don't have an application or anything that works with that, you may be you'll start using that hopefully in the newest version. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to create one kind of relevant to that idea for our stock count. So I got the stock count history line, which is going to be anything that I've processed. So let's give it a name. Let's call it stock count line open, something that pertains to what we're selecting. Then underneath there, we're going to start to expand our database view out. And one of the nice things about Smartlist Designer is that if you have an application installed onto here, some sort of third party that actually installs into the application itself, you should see that listing underneath here. So you'll see all the different modules, manufacturing, field service, Microsoft Dynamics GP, and then be able to go from there. If you had other things added onto this that were outside of there, such as, like a Meritus extended pricing application or OmniPrice or any of those things that actually embed themselves into GP and show up as menu options in here, chances are you're going to find those same references in here. Most good ISVs will deploy their solution in a way that functions well with this. If you don't find it in there, then there's other means that you can go through to get those things added into Smartlist if you need them to. But from here, I'm going to expand Dynamics GP. I'm going to expand my tables. Underneath the tables, I'm going to expand inventory. As I do this, it just starts to break out the different tables and such that are out there underneath that listing. The majority of those are hopefully named in a nice way that you can pick up on. If you have any questions about what it is that you're going to select, a lot of times a quick search on the web will find you information, or you do have underneath the tools option in Dynamics GP, resource descriptions, and tables to go and find specific information about the table that you're looking for. So in my case, I know I want stock count line, and I'm going to add in the stock count serial lot information as well. But if you had any questions as to what it is that you were selecting, then you can go into tools, table descriptions, and then find information on those prior to adding those in. Like I said, usually a quick search on the web. There's a lot of content out there to help track these types of things down. So, like I said, hopefully just a quick search on the web will point you in the right direction. But again, this utility in GP is kind of helpful in the sense that if I know that I want the stock count line, I can find it underneath my inventory dropdown. And if I just want to see what it is before getting in to really do much with it, I can see what it is from there, and I can click on the usage from there and see that it's used in these windows in the system, and it's used on these specific reports. So there's a few things that you can do with it at that point to help narrow it down. Obviously, we could just expand the column over here too to see the columns that show up within it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to expand out my stock count line. I'm going to grab my count ID, because that's the count ID that I put in for it, so I can recognize if it's my fiscal 2020 stock count or it's my quarterly one. I'm going to grab my item number, my location code, bin number sounds good. We'll grab the captured quantity, counted quantity, and let's go ahead and get the variance at that point as well. Now, one thing that this doesn't have is it does not have the item description. So if I want that to be part of my smart list, then I do have to start joining some tables together on this. So I'm going to scroll up. I'm going to find my item master. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my item description from there. And just because I want to be able to project some costs maybe associated with this, I'm going to go ahead and grab the current cost from that item as well. And then anything else that makes sense from here, item class or generic description, any of those pieces of information that I think would be beneficial for my smart list. After I've got those onto here, let's go back down to my stock count line. I'm going to shrink that up because I don't think I need anything else from there. I guess I could throw the count date in there just so that shows up. And then let's go ahead and I'm going to grab my serial number information just in case. And from here, I'm just going to grab my serial lot number and variance quantity from there as well. So after I've joined those different tables in, the next part of this process is I just need to review the selected fields. One nuance of this that has yet to be fixed is the ability to drag and drop and move these columns around. So if I say, okay, this is the way it's sorted to begin with. If I wanted to move those columns around and have them that way from the get-go, then I have to remove those columns and then add them in the sequence that I want them to show up. Now, if you're okay with doing it after the fact, if I have these ordered differently, and let's say that I wanted my item description to be up next to my item number, I can use a function that I'll show here in a moment in the administration side to reorder these columns so that it looks nicer. So I'm going to leave the selected columns as it is. What I do have to do is that since I added in new tables to this, I do have to give what that relationship is, because right now it has no idea what is joining my item master to my stock count line, or what is joining my serial line to my item master or my stock count line. So in this relationship section, you have to designate what equals what, essentially. And there's two ways that you can do this. One is the auto-link function. If you're using native tables in the system and they have the joins and the relationships already built, you should be able to hit auto-link and the system will do it for you. Fingers crossed. If it doesn't work out for you, then you may have to go through and just touch some of this up. So I'm going to review this just to make sure it looks the way that I want it to. So my item master right now is linked to my stock count serial. I don't want that. I want it linked to the stock count line. So I'm going to match that one around. And the only reason that I changed that one from a logical standpoint is that in here, I don't want to link to the stock count line, because if the item doesn't have a serial number, then it wouldn't show up on my smart list. Next one is, I don't know that I need my bin number relationship on here, so I'm just going to drop that one off. I probably should. Let's go ahead and I'll leave that one on there, because if there are multiple bins, it could unrelate itself. Stock count line, location code. There isn't a join that I have to worry about for the item master location code, so I'm going to go ahead and drop that off. Looks good. Stock count line. So I think those look okay. If you have any worries about things showing up, you can always hit execute query up at the top just to see if you get the expected results down at the bottom. I'm getting repeating records down here, so I have to go and kind of weed through this and figure out what it is that I've done to get multiple values to show up. One thing that I'm going to notice is that it didn't do anything for like my sequence number. So a lot of times when we're joining in transaction data and things along those lines, you'll have a sequence number that is related between a header and a footer value or something along those lines. So in this case, my relationship between here should be some type of sequence number potentially. It doesn't quite. That is the case on this specific one. I know it is on the history one. So then the other part that I do with a lot of these is you have to understand what the middle value means between these. So I've got my table on the left linked to my table on the right, and then in the middle I have an inner join. And what this represents, there's three different options here. Left join means that it's going to go ahead and return all values from the left side regardless of if it finds something on the right side. So if it finds an item number here that doesn't exist over here, it still reports this information. Inner join means that it has to exist here and here. And then a cross join means that it's going to return everything from over here and everything over here, regardless of whether or not they match. If it finds a match, then it'll line up and show those. If it doesn't find a match, then you'll end up with a null or blank value on one side or a null or blank value on the other side. We'll just review through each one of these, make sure everything kind of looks the way that we need it to. Okay, stock line out, stock line. And then I look like I need to add one more. So let's go ahead and do one more here. We'll say the item number, inner joins to here and here. A little more complex than normally looking for, but let's go ahead and see if that one works out a little bit better. That looks better. We've got a lot of information showing up in here now. We do have repeating rows, but that's because I've got that serial number, lot number information over on the left-hand side. So it looks like it's returning everything that I want it to. Now I can add in some additional pieces from here. If I just want to see what this looks like now, go ahead and say OK in the upper left-hand corner. Sometimes it's easier to look at this than the query window, that's for sure. So this right here, if I was to relate this back to information in the system, I go in and I look at my stock count entry. The information that's showing in my smart list for review is the same information essentially that's in this window here. And the reason that we're seeing multiple 100 XLGs showing up on there is because when it ran those, it recognized multiple serial numbers and such out there for it as well. So as it captured and built this out, it's recognizing the underlying information for these. So you'll see this type of information kind of pull out within here. Now, one thing you'll notice is, again, it's lost other values in here, and that's because items on this, like the gproc and the 2-A and some of the other ones, those are not serial tracked items. So it's lost those in my count because of what has occurred in the matching out here. So I'm going to go back into my Smartlist Designer and modify this. Really easy to get back in and work with something. And I'm just going to change some of these values here to give me information from one side to the other. Item master to there should be good. Stock count line to here. I'm going to do the left joins on these because I don't need to report anything from the serial if it's a non-serial item. So now what my expectation is that, you know, we're only getting where items exist, obviously, in the master at this point, But if something doesn't exist in the stock count serial number relationship, it should still show up on my smart list. So you'll just have to be aware of that. If you have something and you've linked, let's say you went in and you linked your vendor master to transactions, and there's no transactions in the table and your vendor doesn't show up in the list, then that could be the reason you have an inner join and it didn't find any record in one table, so it doesn't report it in the other. I'm going to say okay to that, let it rerun, and we should hopefully see some other, there we go, other items showing up in here that don't have that are not serialized. A lot of records showing up because I did not pare mine down and say I only want to count for a specific location. So Fabricant has tons of locations in it for like different work centers and things along those lines. But now it's reporting that information for me. Let's go back into Modify. And one thing that I know individuals like to do is as they start to go through and they're keying in a stock count, as variances are found, they want to see what that projected cost is. You can't see essentially what it's going to be if they're adjusting out a whole bunch, because the inventory valuation method drives what cost is going to be pulled from there. But let's say that we wanted to calculate from the stock count side what the estimated amount is before we actually would create the variance. And the same concept goes on any of the other windows if we just want to add a calculation. So to add a calculation in our selected field area, in the upper right-hand corner, there's this little function button. And here we'll select that, and we can add a function into this to do the multiplication for us to calculate our cost. So I'm going to add a new column. Going to give it a name, variance estimated extended cost, or variance estimated cost, whatever makes the most sense. You'll define what type it is. One thing that I like to do with some of these is create calculated fields for dates and mine out the month or even the year into its own designated column. It's a fun thing to do. I'm going to say this one's a currency. And here's where a little bit of a nuance comes for calculating these. Whenever I come in and I select a column, so in this case I want to multiply my variance quantity. When I do this, it puts my cursor of the expression at the beginning every time I double click one of these. So that's a nuisance to this window for the way that it's doing it. If you can build your expression backwards, you don't have to go down and click here to get your cursor to show up at the end, but it's just a little tip that I wanted to pass along to you that, just be aware of where the cursor is ending up in here for where we're going to add our values. So this expression is not a freeform type. I do have to select each thing. So double clicked on my column, it added that in. Go to my functions. I know I want to do arithmetic, so I'm going to do multiplication. Notice my cursor just went right to the beginning of that field again, so I need to click at the end. And then I'm going to go back, and there's no unit cost or anything captured for this. So just to get my projected maybe cost from this, I'm going to grab my current cost. And again, make sure my cursor's at the end of that just so that when I double click, it pulls in there. And let's just validate. So I've got my stock count variance quantity times current cost. And I would save that. It'll just pop out and say, hey, this field is valid. There wasn't anything wrong in the calculation there. And then I would say okay. And what that'll do is that'll add it into my field list to populate in here, and it'll show up on my report. The other thing that we can do with this is we can add filters. So if we didn't want some specific value to show up on here anytime that it's running, we could add a filter. And this is one of the benefits to using Smartlist Designer over your Smartlist favorites. Think of any Smartlist that you hit the common 4 characteristics for every single time you're running it. Well, you could take one of your existing favorites out here and build those into it as filters beforehand and save it as a new Smartlist. Just kind of keep that in mind, that if you wanted to pre-filter these, you could build in as many filters as you wanted to get it back and get your 4 search criteria back beforehand. So I'll show you an example of that here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and say OK to that now that I've got calculated field on there. I don't see my calculated field, so let's go back and let's check our calculated field. There we go. Not sure why it hadn't showed up to begin with, but let's go ahead and say OK one more time and see if that pops in there now. Okay. Granted, they're all zeros because I don't have any values or anything showing up in there just at the moment, but because I have those, just below 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So as soon as I save those onto this, you'll start to see that calculated out. So it is a live feed, a live transaction for calculating those things. So you should see it immediately calculate out into the calculation within here. So one thing I was going to show you is that as I did this, my item description went over there. Now, granted, I could create a favorite and resort that, but if I just, it was going to bother me because every time I got in here, I was going to always have to move that column around. So anytime you get to that point where you've started your Smartlist Designer, and let's say you've got 30 fields down in that you've added in that you wanted to be part of that Smartlist, and then found out that you didn't include one of them in the correct order or something, well, the alternative to going back and wiping out all the columns and then re-adding them in that correct order is to go into administration. If you scroll down underneath your setup here and go to Smartlist options, go underneath your drop down here, and let's just scroll down. And there's my new Smartlist that I just created, shows up in this list. And what I can do is I should be able to come in here to this and move those columns around. And what this is doing is for the asterisk version of the Smartlist, it's moving those things around. The other thing that they've added to this that was new to the system that works for other Smartlists, not just the ones that you created through Smartlist Designer, is you do have the ability to put passwords on these for changing the defaults and so on. So if somebody wanted to get in and modify the search defaults for something along those lines, they'd have to have a password to be able to modify those. So if you ever had a problem with people changing Smartlist favorites that are out there, you can put a system-wide password on, especially if you're the person that has to manage those. But now that I've moved those columns around and I say OK to it, if I go back to my Smartlist now, go back to my inventory, and again, instead of having to remove all those columns around and everything, this has moved it for me by using the Smartlist options window. So just a little trick there, a little tip to make sure that you don't run into that where you have to remove multiple columns to get things to line up where you want them to. Obviously, you could create a favorite if you wanted to from this and then throw your columns in whatever order you wanted, but this just removes that issue where every time somebody goes to the asterisk, it's ordered in that specific way already. Okay, so another piece of information that is helpful from a Smartlist Designer standpoint is, again, that concept that I mentioned where you would create a pre-filtered Smartlist to begin with. So if I'm always coming into sales transactions and I'm running my open invoices here, but you know what? My open invoices is always filtered by these things. It's always got these, so I've only got 2 spots. Well, I'd love to have more spots than that. So my recommendation to do is create a favorite out here. So I'm going to come in. I'm going to go ahead and leave the document type. We'll take the document type off. Take this off. We want to maintain the columns that we have out there and everything. But I'm going to remove those. Say OK. And I'm just going to call this a new report out here and call it Open Invoices Unfiltered to begin with. And I'm going to add that favorite to the system. Now that I've got my predetermined columns that I want on here and everything, I'm going to hit New in the upper left-hand corner. No filters or anything to it right at the moment. And then as we drop down to the bottom here, we should be able to fill in these values to begin with and go ahead and define date ranges or whatever to that. But this will save us having to worry about one of those values being pre-populated. Actually, I'm going to cancel out of this real quick, and I'm going to add one more column onto this because unposted was something that we wanted. So just make sure that your columns all exist on here. But let's grab this last one for the document status. There we go. So now I'll hit New. Let's do a filter. SOP type is invoice. And we'll do document status. Let's see if, always show invoices and say OK. And if that worked, it would have worked and only returned those values. Let's just see where I've got an issue on this. So this is sales document status. Let's see if it's my document status that it has an issue with. Looks like it. Okay, so document status, it's recognizing it as a 0 or something along those lines. Did I grab the wrong one? Nope. So I'm not 100% sure what my document status necessarily would be in this case. So I'd have to look and do some research. Some of these, it translates back to the integer value that it would be out there versus it being an open transaction or whatnot. I'm wondering if my 7s are the ones that I need to have. So you may have to overcome some issues along this line that you're seeing here where my document status here is not the same as my document status in another window. But once you overcome those, now we've got just a smart list that's already filtered down to this, just the invoices. One thing to note is that because I did do this directly from a pre-existing one, then I can make selections here to go to existing go-tos off of that. So diving back into our Smartlist Designer, go-tos are not something that are just kind of natively nice about using Smartlist Designer. And let me show you those real quick. So in my stock count line open, one that I'm in, up here at the top, you've got a Create Go-To dropdown to be able to select. And in here, you can have your new Smart List go to an existing GP Smart List, a GP navigation list, or a web page. So there's none of that nice out-of-the-box built-in stuff for, when I double-click on it, it takes me into that transaction. There's none of that in these menu options in the system. So I could have this go to one of the GP navigation lists and open up the inventory transactions one or whatever it may be. But if that's not the case, then I can also piggyback off of an existing one. So this one here, the stock count line open, this was one that I created brand new, didn't select any type of smart list in the system to create one from or anything. and it comes up with, again, that blank slate. But if you cheat a little bit, and let's say that you select one out here to begin with, let's say, for example, my item quantities. I selected my item quantities to begin with, and then I created this item sales period history as a Smartlist Designer option out here. So whenever I go off of item quantities, and I'll show you this, it's not one that I can modify. This is pre-existing GP one, as you recognize. And then if I hit new, directly off of that, once I have it selected, and it pulls in the values that you see like this one has here. If I look at my go-tos, what it did is it picked up what was already embedded in this. They don't function beautifully, but they do function. And the thing to remember is that and you'll have to overcome some of the difficulties with this. It's a learning experience. I've had to overcome some of the things with it. You have to kind of think of the logic that goes into the window. Okay, when I first get into the window that this is taking me to, I fill out the item number, and then I fill this out, and then I fill this out. So you have to kind of think of that, and you have to order your columns in that regard. And once you do that, then you can utilize these same go-tos for your new function. So, for example, I used item quantities to spawn this one here for the item sales period history one. And if we look at it, same go-tos underneath there, view, item maintenance, item inquiry, so on and so forth. When I built out my go-to, I made sure my item number was at the beginning. So what it'll do between these with those go-tos built in is that I don't have a traditional double click. I don't have the capability from here to define one of those pre-existing ones as the default double click go-to, but because they are there, I do have the ability to highlight a line, click go to, and then go to view, which was the native way that it was built in. Now the nuance of this is that all it did was fill in my item number. It did not pick up the location code. So like I said, it will take you to that window, but it's not going to necessarily be the exact same experience that you had with the out-of-the-box one. You know, so for example, the item quantities one, when I give a double click on one of those with item number and location code, it just immediately dove me into here. So there may be issues or nuances that you run into as you're looking at these where it'll get you 50% of the way there, 25% of the way there, and you kind of have to fill it in. It's just one of those things that you overcome. Again, the whole premise of Smartlist Designer is to get your feet wet, get into it, create simple reports, simple smart lists from this, you know, and determine as you're working with it when you hit that wall that makes you want to look at more. You know, this is really frustrating. I got in, I created these. It worked great for the first couple simple ones and stuff, but now my complexity is increasing and my company is evolving, and the more complexity that there is, it's obvious to me that this isn't going to work for things going down the road. So that's when, you know, you make that decision to graduate to a paid application. But at least you've done your legwork, and learning Smartlist Designer only benefits you because you start to learn those tables and things along those lines that go with it. And then you're ready for the big step up to the next one. So a lot of benefit to this, a lot of pluses, some negatives, like I said, some things that you just have to get used to as you're going through. So we will put these slides up. If there's any questions, go ahead and get those in now, and we'll wrap up here in a moment with questions. I just wanted to pull up a quick thing out here on a few of the enhancements that they've done to the system, just so we cover all our bases. So one of the things that they did add for this is that you can create Excel reports of these. And the thing to remember is with any of your out-of-the-box smart lists that are out here, there already is a corresponding Microsoft Dynamics GP Excel refreshable report deployed in the system. And I've mentioned this before. If you're not aware of those being part of your application and something that, you know, you would love to take advantage of, it's available. And what that is think of any of these smart lists that you have out here for, let's say, items by site. there is a corresponding Excel refreshable for this over in my inventory module underneath my Excel reports for items by site. So any of these that have the asterisks on the end of them, there should be a corresponding one that is already generated and available in the Excel refreshable reports. So let's go ahead and find that real quick. So item quantities, item by site. Benefit of these, obviously, is that these are based on Windows authentication, and any user could utilize these. They don't have to be a GP user. They just need to have the appropriate SQL security and such set up. But that same Smartlist that I just ran in GP has a corresponding Excel refreshable to be able to run over here. So those are available out of the box. Now, from a Smartlist Designer standpoint, I can create new Excel refreshable reports, but the stipulation is that those have to be based upon a SQL view. So a SQL view is basically the backbone of any of one of these smart lists that exists in the system. So I'm going to go up to my inventory. I'm going to select new. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down on here. And at the bottom of this list, you should see views listed. And I'm going to grab company. And in order to create an Excel refreshable report, I do have to have a SQL view to be able to base it upon. So that's the only stipulation for this. So don't worry about the pre-existing ones. You should already have those deployed and available to you. But any of your new ones that you create, you have to consider that at the forefront of creating one of these, whether or not you're going to want an Excel version of it. If you do want an Excel version of it, you're not going to be choosing tables and such up here at the top. You're going to be working from a view somewhere in the system. Just keep that in mind as you're getting ready to work with these, and where you're going to want your actual data to show up. Who's going to be looking at it? Who's going to be digesting that information? Are they going to be in Excel? Are they going to be in GP? So when I go down to views and I look at this, I should get a list of all the views that are available out of my database to be able to work with. Now the nice thing is that from Smartlist Designer, if you wanted to create an Excel refreshable above and beyond what's just available in the ones in the list out here or something along those lines, you can take advantage of the views in the system to do that. And most of the views are named the exact same thing that they're named underneath the drop-downs in here. So when this finally expands, we should find sales line items and sales transactions and receivables transactions and customer addresses and purchase line items and all of those different things showing up in that list. Apparently was a bad idea to select my views, but we'll see. So the nice thing about it is that if I wanted to build from the ground up, I could find one of these out here that, you know, I can run and look at in Smartlist and find all of the fields and everything that I want this person to view. Then I could go through and configure that to work within here as well. And it looks like it's just going to take forever to run this. We'll see, give it a moment later. And normally it doesn't take this long. Could vary by environment. Mine has a lot of third-party ISVs in there, and I'm wondering if because I've installed this against a database that I've not, that I've got a lot of ISVs installed in, it might just be taking an extra couple seconds here. But once this is available and deployed, you should end up with, okay, well that's figuring out what it's doing. I'm going to waste time looking at it. What it should do is it should pull up a publish icon at the top. So once I find that SQL view and I select it, I add in my columns and everything that I want to in Smartlist Designer. So here you can see it expanded the views. Underneath here you see that it's got my actual views listed. Like I said, as you're reviewing this list of views, there should be things that match verbatim the exact same naming schemes that are underneath your out-of-the-box smart lists. Once I have a view selected, my columns filled out, all of that stuff, and I pull that back in, one of the things that will come up is this publish button. And whenever I click on publish, it will create in that same directory that we saw a moment ago on my inventory side or wherever it's at, it'll deploy that, in this case, item, period, sales, summary, Excel report to that directory for me to use. And it finally expanded. So you would come in and let's just say that we wanted to create a new, I don't know, attendance detail or attendance summary. So I'm just going to grab everything underneath here. We'll throw this under the company setting, attendance. Say OK. See if this returns any data. And then since I selected the view, up here at the top, it shows publish. So when I click on publish, should just run really quick. Excel report published successfully. And because I had this one marked to the company, if I go back to my administration, in this case, I have to go to the specific module where I told it to land. So go back to administration, look under administration and Excel reports. I should find my newly deployed Excel report somewhere underneath here. Granted, when I look at this, it's everything in the system. But there's my attendance summary that it deployed out to this directory because that's where I have all of my Excel reports deploying. And the benefit there is now you've got an Excel version of that versus the Smartlist version, and it runs just as you would expect it to run, as fast as possible with the Excel report. You know, so from a Smartlist standpoint, when I was running the attendance detail, we refresh that. Let me enable my content here. That's done. That's still running. So big leap in speed, and this is only like 33 records or 40 records or whatever it may be. So, you know, that's always the benefit of the Excel reports is the speed that they run. All right, so next part of this. So that's our Excel reports. One thing that I did document that's in this slide, and it's been in previous slides, that you may run into is if you do any of these where you do create a smart list into Excel version, sometimes your dates get messed up and they look like this. And if that's the case, I included this in the slides for you to fix it. There's a Dex INI file switch that you turn on within there. We're happy to help you with this, but once this is turned on, it will fix those dates. So if you have any of those that are coming up, you can do that with it. Just be aware that if you're using the web client heavily and people are going to be accessing this specific smart list from the web client, doesn't always fix those. We may need to go a different route. So new to 2015 R2, security workflow was added. So if you've ever had that idea, well, I can't create smart lists because people are going to create these and deploy them and be able to look at all sorts of data without, you know, somebody being able to say, okay, you can now create security on the view creation so that people cannot create these views without it flowing through some type of routing. So in this case, the user field list ADH table contains GL or whatever it may be. That's going to send it over and require somebody to sign off on it before it can be deployed. New to GP 2016, import-export capabilities for custom smart lists. This is just so that you can share, backup, and collaborate and everything along those lines. You can export those values from there. So let's say you created a whole bunch of really nice stuff and you wanted to save it as is, or, you know, again, those redundant backups so that if somebody would get in and mess with one of those and break the smart list, you could always restore it from a functioning copy. And the last thing I like to throw in here, I think they've added, I don't know that they've added anything new to this list, but I always like to include this one on there so you know the differences between what you're getting in one and what you're getting in the other. So Smartlist Builder, again, the add-on application that you can buy, and then Smartlist Designer, your out-of-the-box solution that you have if you don't own Smartlist Builder. And this is just kind of the compare and contrast value that you can use for this.